Paper Crafters Library. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to Spellbinders Embossability folders. Now, Spellbinders Embossabilities are a unique reversible embossing folder. With 2 designs built into each folder, you get double the value and design possibilities than with regular embossing folders. Now, these folders are sold in 2 different sizes, the 5.5 by 4 1/4 and 5 by 7 inch sizes. There's currently 8 different designs in the 5.5 by 4 1/4 inch size, and these retail for around $7.99 US. There are 12 different designs in the 5 by 7 inch size, and these retail for around $9.99 US. As I mentioned just a moment ago, these embossing folders are very unique because you get 2 designs in each folder. So here on the inside would be the one design. So if you were to put your cardstock here and emboss, this would be the pattern that you get. If you just take it, flip it, fold it in the opposite direction, there you get the second design. So let's take a look at some of the different ways you can use these embossing folders. In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating using my Spellbinders Grand Caliber. Now, you can certainly use these folders with other die cutting machines. You just need to ensure that you use the correct sandwich. And Spellbinders has a great compatibility chart on their website which talks about the correct sandwiches for different die cutting machines. So if you're using a Grand Caliber, you are going to need to purchase the Grand Raspberry Plate. Now, this is an adapter for using the embossabilities with the Grand Caliber, and it does not come with the machine itself. Now, the Grand Raspberry Plate retails for around $12.99 US. Now, there's also the junior replacement plates which can be used with the Spellbinders Grand Caliber, and if that's what you're using, then you would purchase the junior Raspberry Spacer Plate, which retails for around $8.99 US. Now, the sandwich is really easy. You're going to start with your A plate, which is your base plate. Next, you're going to take your embossability folder, and you want to make sure that whichever of the patterns you want to use for your material, that has to be to the inside. You then take your material, in this case I'm using cardstock, you lay it on the surface of your embossing folder. Then you fold it closed so that you can see it's now sandwiched inside. You place it onto your base plate. Then you take your adapter plate and you run this through your Grand Caliber. So now when you remove your cardstock from your folder, you'll see what a gorgeous embossed pattern you get. Now, if you look at your cardstock, you'll notice that on one side you have an embossed pattern. So it looks like the pattern is coming up off the page towards you. If you flip that over, it's going to look like the pattern is recessed into the paper, and that's the debossed side of the paper. And either side is equally beautiful. You can use either one and get a totally different look. So with the pattern looking so beautiful on cardstock, I wanted to see what other types of materials I could emboss using my Embossabilities folders. So here's what vellum looks like. You can see this has a really neat look because where it embossed, you get this slight white tinge to it. Here I've embossed sticky back canvas and regular canvas. Now, the sticky back, you get a little bit more of a deep impression, as you can see here. Here I've embossed some of the Spellbinders metal foil. Here I've embossed some lightweight, like a wood type paper. Here you can see this really cool, this is a thicker acetate or window sheet that I've embossed, and that just looks, it almost looks like glass. And then here's some fun foam that I've embossed, and with the fun foam you don't get as crisp of an impression as you do with some of the other materials, but it still looks pretty neat nonetheless. Now, I've also tried cork, and that didn't work out so well, and a light weave fabric, that didn't work well either. Essentially, your material needs to be rigid enough that it's going to be able to hold the pattern. Now, one thing though that I do want to point out, when you are embossing a material that's one-sided, you have to be very careful as to what orientation you place it inside your embossing folder. So here's what I mean about this. Here I have a piece of this kind of wood paper that I used for this piece here. You can see it has the wood on one side and then it's just white on the other side. So depending on what you want it to look like from the front. So here my image is embossed, so it looks like it's coming out of the paper. Well, that means that when I place my wood onto my embossing folder, I have to place it on a particular side. So now if you take a close look at the embossing folder, you'll see that in one side it looks like this is the deboss side where it looks like your pattern is recessed. And if you look at the other side and run your hand over it, you're going to notice that the pattern is raised. So if you want the pattern to be embossed coming out of the paper, you're going to put it on the opposite, the recessed side. So when you put your wood on the recessed side, your wood is facing the recessed side. If you want your pattern to be debossed, so to look like it's sinking into the material, you're going to put your wood on the raised side and then run it through your embossing folder like that. So the only time you need to pay attention to which side you orient the good side of your material is if it's a double-sided material like this one. And one of the things I love about the Em-Bossabilities is that you're not only limited to embossing materials that fit within your folder. You're really only limited by the size of your platform. So as long as you can fit your embossing folder and your material on this base plate, you're good to go. So here I have a piece of cardstock, and this piece is 10 inches by 5.5 inches. I'm going to take it and I'm going to place it on the inside of my folder, making sure that it's on the pattern. So you'll notice when you look at your folder that there's the pattern and then there's a little bit of a flat edge. So I'm making sure I'm aligning this on the pattern. Then I'm going to fold my embossing folder closed. You can see here how nicely that fits on my platform. I'm then going to take my adapter plate and I'm going to run that through my grand caliper. So here you can see I now have a portion of my cardstock piece embossed. So now what I want to do is I want to shift this down, and just to make sure my pattern aligns, I want to align it with the pattern on my embossing folder. So this last row I'm going to align on top of that image. And kind of like a puzzle, I guess, you will kind of feel it click in place when you have it placed back onto your embossing plate. And of course you should see your pattern line up. So I've overlapped it on the one side, and then I'm going to close my plate or my embossing folder, place my adapter plate on top, and run that through my grand caliper again. So now when you remove it, you can see I have my embossed pattern going the entire length. I just have a little bit that's unembossed. So I do the same thing. I align it with my pattern. I make sure it kind of fits in place just like a puzzle. Close it and run it through my grand caliper again. Now it doesn't matter that if you look here, you'll see the cardstock is extending beyond my base plate. That is okay. I'm just going to make sure that when I insert it into my grand caliper, I'm inserting it this way. So this is hanging out the bottom of my plate. So I'm just going to run this through my grand caliper once more. So there you go. You can see that I have my entire piece now embossed, and you can see the difference in size of this compared to the embossing folder. And I could have kept going if this had been a longer piece of cardstock. And one of the things that I really like, and I've noticed about using the Spellbinders Em-Bossabilities versus embossing folders from other companies, is that the line or the seam isn't as prominent or doesn't show up as much on your embossed pattern when you're embossing pieces of cardstock or other materials that are longer than the folder. If you look at this embossed piece, you'd be hard pressed to tell where the seam actually was, and I really like that about this. Letterpress is really popular right now, and it's really easy to achieve a letterpress look with your Em-Bossabilities. Now with letterpress, a colored image is depressed or debossed into the surface of your paper. To achieve this look, take a dye-based ink pad and pat it or rub it onto the raised surface of your Em-Bossability. Now a dye-based ink pad is going to work much better than a pigment ink pad, simply because if you look at a dye-based ink pad, the pad surface is quite rigid, versus most pigment inks tend to have a very soft, spongy surface. You can see here, if I stick my finger there, how soft and squishy that is. As you press that against your embossing folder, if you're not careful, you can end up with the ink squishing in between these raised edges, and then you're going to totally lose the whole letterpress effect. with a dye-based ink pad or an ink pad that has a rigid surface, if you can pat it, you can drag it or rub it all over the surface of your embossing folder, and you're going to notice that the ink is staying on the raised image. It's not getting in between the crevices. You then take your paper and lay it on the non-inked side, and that's going to help keep it from accidentally slipping. Now I also have here some of my Scotch matte finish tape handy, because I'm going to use it to help secure my cardstock piece in place on my embossing folder. If you don't do that, you can end up with your cardstock piece slipping. And then here's an example. You end up with kind of a mucked up letterpress effect. So the trick to this, though, of course, is where you have your tape. When you pull it off, you're going to lose the ink from the letterpress. So when you're doing this, always make sure that you cut your cardstock piece to at least 1/4 inch longer than the size you need for your project piece. So since I've been sitting here talking to you, I'm just going to take my ink pad and ink this up again. So now I'm going to fold this closed. I'm going to take my adapter plate and lay that on top, and then run this through my grand caliber. And then when you remove it from your folder, you get this really neat letterpress effect. Now I have found that the image or the letterpress impression that I get is not always 100% perfect, which is another reason for cutting your cardstock piece bigger than the size of the final letterpress image you want, because then you can just cut it down or trim it down to size and take the best impression from the whole cardstock piece. Now if you take your ink and you apply it to the other side of your embossing folder, you end up with a totally different look. So here now I've got my ink on the opposite side. I'm once again going to take my cardstock piece and I'm going to place a little bit of tape on top. And if you're finding that it's still slipping with just the one tape, you can always take a little bit and place it on the bottom. In that case, you just want to make sure you leave more excess room so that you can cut that off afterwards. You then follow the same process. You fold it closed, put your adapter plate on top, run it through your grand caliber. And then when you take your paper out, you can see that you actually end up with a totally different look. You can see how different these are. So 2 ways to get a letterpress type look using your same pattern on your Embossability folder. Well, I hope this has given you some ideas on the different ways that you can use your Embossabilities. For more videos on Spellbinders products and how to use them, along with project ideas, please visit Paper Crafter's Library.